Traffic troubles in the Sepulveda Pass on the 405 South at Mulholland Skirball. That's an accident blocking the carpool lane. Also seeing delays on the northbound side from Carson Street up to Santa Monica Boulevard. In Burbank, a wreck on the 5 South at Alameda Avenue. In the number 2 lane, traffic slowing there from Empire Avenue. And in downtown LA, a disabled vehicle on the 101 North past Alameda Street.
Warning, if you are 60 or older, RSV can be a dangerous respiratory virus.
Not all dangers come with warning labels. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about getting vaccinated against RSV today. Learn more at bewareofrsv.com. This message is brought to you by Pfizer.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man.
The Dodgers, baseball's hottest team, are back in action after getting 2 days off. They're in Cleveland today for the start of a 6-game road trip. The Dodgers are 17-2 in August and 29 games over 500. James Harden spoke to NBA investigators Monday about calling Philadelphia 76ers president Daryl Morey a liar. The league is trying to determine if the Sixers violated salary cap rules. Harden told the investigators he exercised his $35.6 million option with the Sixers in June only because Morey told him he would trade him if he agreed to the option. Morey announced last week he's not trading Harden, prompting the 10-time All-Star to put Morey on blast. Harden wants to be traded to the Clippers. Morey is asking for a starter, maybe 2, and multiple first-round picks. Stay tuned on this drama. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
Somebody that just loves to learn, and another child grows up to be somebody you just love to burn. Mom loves the both of them. You see, it's in the blood. Both kids are good to mom. Blood's thicker than the mud. It's a family affair. It's a family affair.
I'm Tavis, Smiley, and I've been looking forward to this hour. In the grand mosaic of history, few possess a lineage as resonant as Kenneth B. Morris, Jr. He stands not only as the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, but also as the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington, two names, of course, that have left an enduring mark on the American story. I'm pleased to welcome to this program Kenneth B. Morris, Jr. Kenneth, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Tavis. How are you?
Man, if I complained, I'd be an ingrate. I am doing well, and I am delighted to be in dialogue with you. It's a beautiful thing just to hear your voice through this fiber optic line. So thank you for the time. I'm glad we have an hour. There's so much I want to talk to you about, Kenneth, in this hour. Let me start with this, and I'm going to try to make this thing work in this hour because again, there's so much to talk about. I've been thinking for 2 days now how I want to frame this. So let me just see what we can do here. First of all, I suspect that when you are related to both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, and you've had occasion to share that with other people, my sense is you've been called a liar in your life probably more times than you can count.
Oh, hey, I've been called a liar by friends, family, teachers, principals. As you said, more times than I can count for sure. It's one of those things that I remember being a little boy, and when I did have the courage to tell somebody that I was related to both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, nobody ever believed me. And I never thought that it was a point worth arguing. So you're right on target with that.
Yep. When you get called a liar that many times as a young person who is proud of his family heritage, what impact does that have on a young mind, a young heart?
Well, you're making me think about a story. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old, and I remember my teacher said to all of my classmates and to me, go home and bring back something that can tell the story of your family history, your family tree. And my teacher didn't know my connection to Douglass and Washington. This was just an assignment that she was giving to the whole class. Mm-hmm. So I went home to my mother and I said, I've got this assignment. What should I bring? And she runs into the bedroom and goes under the bed, and she comes back and she hands me this cane. And I look at that and I said, well, what is this? And she said, well, that's Abraham Lincoln's cane. And I said, wait a minute, Mom, when I tell people I'm related to Douglass and Washington, nobody ever believes me. And you want me to take this cane to school and tell my classmates and my teachers that that's Abraham Lincoln's cane? And she said, yeah, you'll be all right. Go on and do it. So I go to school, and later on that afternoon, my mother gets a call from the principal, and she said, I've got Kenny here in my office, and he seems to have some issues with telling the truth. So, yeah, and you know what happened next after that. Mom went down and she straightened things out. But to your point, when you're a kid, when you're young, and people don't believe you, you start to feel embarrassed about sharing that. And I really spent my whole life, for a lot of reasons, not only because people didn't believe me, but I also saw what the pressure had done to those that came before me to try to live up, to legacies of these two great and influential American heroes. And the pressure and the weight of expectation that people in my family have carried. So, yeah, I spent most of my life, as I say today, decisively disengaged from my lineage.
Yeah. Just because I'm curious, it's 2023. Where is that cane now?
That cane is at the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site in the Anacostia neighborhood of Washington, D.C. My great-grandmother, Fanny, who was married to Frederick Douglass's grandson, Joseph, she donated it to the National Park Service, which runs the home. So if you go to the visitor center at the home, you'll see the cane in plexiglass. No.
I raise that for a number of reasons, not the least of which is many in this audience may recall this, some may recall. Years ago, I curated an exhibit called the African American Imprint. It was an exhibit that had never been done before. It toured the country for 4 years. I got Walmart to pay for it. It toured the country for 4 years. And it pulled together over 300 unique and rare artifacts and items that many in the nation had never seen before. I was borrowing these items from everywhere. I even got the country of Ghana to loan the doors of no return from the Alina slave castles. Those doors were part of this exhibit. It toured the country for 4 years. It started the week that Obama was inaugurated, but it toured for 4 years, the first 4 years of his presidency. There were a number of Frederick Douglass items. I thank your family for loaning items to that exhibit that traveled the country for 4 years. And I learned then the value of holding on to items, the value of holding on to these things that we otherwise throw in the trash, because you can't curate an exhibit if ain't nobody held on to nothing. And so I asked that question about the cane. I'm glad to know where it is. Glad to know that your mother took it from underneath the bed and it got somewhere where it could be protected and preserved after you brought it back from school that day. So I was just curious as to where the cane was. You mentioned a moment ago, that is, watching others try to deal with the pressure of being a descendant of both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. I happen to know the story of your grandfather because I know your family's history. But I want the audience to hear, speaking of the pressure and what happens when that pressure becomes so immense, the tragic story of what happened to your grandfather. I want you to unpack for us when we come forward in this conversation with the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington, Kenneth B. Morris, Jr., who you're listening to right now on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What does access mean?
Access means owning a home.
Access means growing my business.
Access means building generational wealth.
No matter your goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Programs and Initiatives provide the tools and resources to help you reach them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, life doesn't stop when cancer starts. After diagnosis, treatment is vital. But for some, just getting there, to appointments, chemo, or radiation, is a major challenge. You can change that. Volunteer to give rides with the American Cancer Society Road to Recovery program. Driving for a few hours of your day can make a life-saving difference for someone with cancer. Visit cancer.org/drive to learn more.
Hey, you're up next.
Ugh, my throat hurts so bad. There's no way I can sing tonight.
Here, try these.
Vicks VapoCool Drops.
Yeah, Vicks VapoCool Drops has maximum strength menthol with a rush of Vicks Vapors.
Ooh, I can already feel it.
I told you. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
Vaporize sore throat pain fast with Vicks VapoCool Drops.
Attorney Joe Cordell.
Divorce forces a father to focus on what's most important, his children. You may no longer be a husband, but you'll always be a dad. In the divorce process, this comes down to three key concerns: physical custody, decision-making, as well as financial support. Each of these is important, and it's important that you choose a lawyer that cares as much about these issues as you do.
1455 Frazee Road, Suite 1050, San Diego, California, 92108. CordellCordell.com.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Extreme heat can make you very sick and can be deadly. For Californians 65 and over, it's important to have a plan. Ask your healthcare provider if your medications affect your ability to cool down. Know the signs of heat illness and stroke, as well as the location of your nearest cooling center or air-conditioned space. And if you have loved ones over 65, be sure to check in on them on hot days. Learn how to stay safer from extreme heat at heatreadyca.com. Brought to you by the state of California.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Our guest in this hour is Kenneth B. Morris, Jr., in case you just tuned in. It's a rare conversation with one who possesses a lineage that is unique in the grand mosaic of American history. He is the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. Talk about a lineage. I wonder, Kenneth B. Morris, Jr., if it's not too painful for you to tell me the story of your grandfather, Frederick Douglass III.
Yeah, Tavis, this is why I always enjoy having conversations with you, because you get right down to it. We don't waste any time. But yeah, this is it's a tragic story, and I really kind of need to start, at the beginning, which is a question that most people ask me when they meet me for the first time. They'll say, well, I know that Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington weren't related to each other. How is it you're related to both of them? And the way that happened is truly a love story. And it was a union of my grandparents on my mother's side. So it's all on my mother's side. My mother's mother, Nettie Hancock Washington, was Booker T. Washington's granddaughter. And my mother's father, Frederick Douglass III, was Frederick Douglass's great-grandson. And so my grandparents met in 1941 at Tuskegee Institute, which, as you know, is a school that Booker T. Washington founded in 1881 at the age of 25 years old. And my grandmother had been born on campus in the hospital there, but she was living in California at the time, and she just happened to be home for summer vacation. My grandfather was a surgeon, and he had been commissioned down to Tuskegee by the Veterans Administration during World War II. And so he was on campus, she was on campus, she was going to go meet friends. And if you can get this visual of my grandmother rushing probably late across campus to meet friends, and my grandfather that evening had decided he was going to eat in the student cafeteria for the first time. And they literally bumped into each other, didn't know that the other descended from an historic family, and they fell in love at first sight and wound up getting married 3 months later. When my mother, Nettie Washington Douglass, was born, she was the first person to unite the bloodlines of the families, and she was an only child, so I have the honor and privilege of being the first male to carry the dual lineage. So that's the happy love story, but the tragic side of it is my grandfather, as I said, was a brilliant man, and he always walked around with this weight of expectation on his shoulders. People expected him to be an iconic leader like his great-grandfather, and he was a namesake to one of this country's greatest heroes. But there's only one Frederick Douglass. And when my grandmother was 3 months pregnant with my mother, that weight became too much for him to endure or to carry, and he took his own life. And so my mother was born without a father and raised without a father. And then when I came along again with the dual lineage, my parents, grandparents, great-grandmothers kind of put this protective shield around me to shield me from these very formidable legacies. And that's one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier that I grew up really decisively disengaged from this lineage until Providence called in my life.
We'll talk about when Providence called in your life later in this conversation. But your grandfather is a surgeon, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
That ain't nothing to turn your nose up at. I mean, he's he wasn't a slacker. He had accomplished a significant amount in his life. That's quite an achievement to be an African American surgeon. There aren't enough African American surgeons, even as we speak right now. I just had a conversation not long ago about the shortage of surgeons in this country, and an even greater shortage of African American surgeons. So it's not like he was unaccomplished, and yet that pressure was so great on him, he took his own life.
Yeah, I'm told that he was brilliant, that his IQ was off the charts, and, he was a genius, and probably, perhaps, that trying to deal with that in your mind, along with, trying to walk around in the shoes of Frederick Douglass was too much, obviously, for him to handle. And again, when I was born, and then I have a younger brother and a younger sister, my parents, they weren't going to put that kind of pressure on us.
Yeah. Let me ask you what you have learned in your life about namesake. I hear the point you made a couple of times now, Kenneth, that you were sort of decisively disengaged from that lineage early on until Providence came calling. Again, we'll get to that later in this story, later in this hour. But let me tell you why I'm asking about namesake. It's not just because of the story you just told, but so many of us who have had to, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps think that it's really cool, or would be really cool to be part of a particular lineage. I recall many, many years ago when I was much more immature than I am now, which is not to say that I'm yet mature, but just less mature than I am now. I remember one day hanging out with, and these are friends of mine. I was hanging out with Jesse Jackson Jr. one day, and Martin Luther King III. Both of these guys are friends of mine. We've known each other for years. We've hung out and traveled together. We're all good friends. And I was hanging out with the two of them, and I remember just sort of saying to myself how different my life might be, and how the journey might have been different if I had been named Martin Luther King III or Jesse Jackson Jr. And it took me years to talk myself out of that, because the more time I spent with, it was Marty at the time. Now you can't call him Marty, you can call him Martin now. But the more time I spent with Junior, who you have to call Jesse, and the more time I spent with Marty back in the day, the more I realized how grateful I was, in fact, how fortunate I was, in fact, to not have that burden on me. To be the son of Martin King or to be the son of Jesse Jackson. These are, again, these two persons who are friends of mine. There are any number of other persons I could point to in this regard. And over the course of my career, I met all kinds of folk who have to live with that namesake, particularly and especially like your grandfather, who was named Frederick Douglass III. You're a part of this lineage, but your name is Kenneth B. Morris Jr. So there's a part of this that you can avoid if you wanted to. When persons name their babies this, it's hard to walk away from that. And again, I've been in many conversations with persons who happen to be well-known, who for this very reason opted not to give their baby their name, to allow them not to have to walk in that shadow, to walk in those shoes. That's just my take on namesake and the maturity that I now have about what that actually means. That's my story. But I'm not the descendant of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. So I'm asking you now, Kenneth B. Morris Jr., to tell me what you've learned over the years about namesake.
Yeah, well, you're making me reflect on all of this now, because I've had a lot of conversations with my mother about the reason that I wasn't named, after my ancestors. So my brother's name is Douglas Washington Morris. So he got the name. My sister is Nettie Douglas Morris, so she got a name. Mm-hmm. And my mother always says to me, she said, I don't know why I let your father talk me into naming him after you, after him. Mm-hmm. I should have named you. But, to your point about, Martin Luther King III and Jesse Jackson Jr. and being the namesake, it's a burden and a blessing for sure.
Yeah.
You had said when you were kind of setting the question up, you said it would be pretty cool. Well, it is cool, to be related to Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, and that's the part that's the blessing. But the burden that comes with that, and I'm several generations removed, and while I say that, in your listeners, it might sound like I'm saying that I'm far removed from both men, and I'm not that far removed, because my great grandmother that I told you about, Fanny Douglass, actually met Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl, and my aunt Portia, to whom I was also very close to, she lived to be 95. Fanny lived to be 101. Aunt Portia was Booker T. Washington's daughter. And I remember being a little boy and sitting at the knee of both of them. My great-grandmother Fanny would tell me firsthand stories about, as she would call him, the man with the great big white hair. And my Aunt Portia would tell me stories about her father, Booker T. Washington. And when we started doing work at Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives in 2007, I remember being with a group of students, and they were all looking at me kind of cross-eyed, like, man, you were so far removed, and what does all of this history have to do with our lives today, and why are you talking about these people that lived so long ago? And so I wanted to give them some context to help them wrap their minds around the distance between the generations. And I have had this thought that I think was kind of profound, that hands that touched the great Frederick Douglass and hands that touched the great Booker T. Washington also touched mine. And so in a sense, even with all of those greats in that title, when you introduced me, I could say I stand one person away from each man. I stand one person away from history, and I stand one person away from slavery. So we're not that far removed. With regard to namesake, I can't imagine what it would have been like for my grandfather to be so close to his great-grandfather, and then for Jesse Jackson Jr. and Martin Luther King III to be, they're right there. They're right up in it.
Sure.
And so that would just, to me, add even more pressure.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and I appreciate the way that you responded to that. It allows me to see even what I said moments ago a bit differently, so thank you for that. Let me ask you right quick, Kenneth, how your mother, to your point, your mother was the one who conjoined these bloodlines, if you will, for the first time, and then come you, your brother, and your sister. But your mother's the one that made these bloodlines come together. Give me a sense of how she processed being the person to do that.
Yeah, she. I remember the first picture that I ever saw of her actually doing a public event. She wasn't even 2 years old yet, and she was at the groundbreaking for the Booker T. Washington National Monument. I forget what year that was, but if she was around 2, she probably wouldn't appreciate me telling her age, so I won't give the year. But she has carried the torch since she was a little girl. There are photographs of her presenting the first Booker T. Washington 50-cent piece that came off the mint in San Francisco to Joe DiMaggio. She was out there just really, talking to school children and really kind of doing this on her own for so many years. But we've talked a lot about the pressure that she felt, and conversations that I've had as I've kind of gone along this journey, and things have started to reveal themselves to me, and I have questions about that. I've been able to have really good conversations with her, and I think her watching me lead our organization and the work that I've been doing, of course, she's very proud of that, but I think that has helped her also to deal with some of the anxieties and pressure that she felt, because that story of the suicide of her father was not something that she ever talked about. And it wasn't until the very first talk I gave, I was at the Visitor Center at the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site. It was the first speech I ever gave in 2007 after we started the organization. And I asked her there was this spirit that was put on me that I felt like I needed to talk about that, but I wasn't going to talk about that publicly unless she was okay with it. And, through tears, she said, yes, go ahead and do what you need to do. And she sat right there in the front row as I, for the first time, publicly talked about what happened to her father. And so I think that was very kind of cathartic and healing moment for her.
That's a lot of love from your mother to let you do that in her presence.
Yeah.
It's a lot of love, brother. So you mentioned earlier, I'm watching my clock here. I've got to step aside in about 2 minutes, and we'll start this now. We'll continue on the other side. But you mentioned earlier that you had tried your best to stay away from this lineage because you knew all the pressure that came along with it, until one day Providence slapped you upside the head. Tell me about that moment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I'll give you the 2-minute start version of this. But, yeah, in 2005, I read a National Geographic magazine cover story, and the headline was 21st Century Slaves, and it was an article about human trafficking and modern-day slavery existing all over the world, including right here in the United States. And at that time, I'd heard about sex slavery, but I thought it happened in far-off places only. And that article really, as you said, it slapped me upside the head, and it floored me. And so I wanted to learn more about the issue, and I started to do some more research. And there was one night I was sitting in the living room of my house, and down the hallway I could hear my daughters getting ready for bed. And I'll tell you on the other side what happened, and that changed the trajectory of my life.
See, Kenneth could be a radio host, because that's how you tease a segment. That's what we call a tease. In this business, we always want you to stick with us through the break, right? We have to do these things. That's how radio works. But we always want you to stick with us and not go anywhere. And so when you get really good at this thing, I've been at it 30 years now. When you get good at this, you know how to put a tease out there that makes you want to stick around to hear the rest of the story. And I don't need to do that right about now, because Kenneth B. Morris Jr. has already done it. That is his name. In case you've just tuned in, he is the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. His mother is the first one to bring these bloodlines together. We'll hear about that moment of providence when we come forward, and we'll talk about the work that he's doing now. He sort of teed this up already, but he co-founded the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. They call it FDFI. It is, frankly, a beacon for eradicating modern oppression, and he's guided, I think, by an unyielding dedication to education, which obviously, interestingly, was at the center, the epicenter of the work and witness of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. And I believe it's fair to say that Kenneth and his family believe that education is still the pathway to freedom. So we'll hear about that moment of providence and the rest of the story, as they say, when we come forward with Kenneth B. Morris Jr. on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
MC Light, or AARP. Hip-hop, the cultural phenomenon that took New York by storm in 1973, is celebrating 50 years of rocking mics and crowds. Whether you're a ride-or-die hip-hop head or simply curious about its origins, check out the latest issue of AARP, the magazine. It celebrates this incredible milestone with a featured story brimming with fun hip-hop facts and history. Head over to aarp.org/black community to to learn more.
Community is more than where you live. It's the people in it who go above and beyond to help it thrive. During the 50th anniversary of hip-hop and the 75th anniversary of Black Radio, AARP recognizes the members, volunteers, people, and partners giving back to our communities. We believe when our efforts drive change for the greater good, we all thrive together. To learn more about how AARP supports efforts to keep our communities thriving, visit aarp.org/blackcommunity.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Former President Trump says he'll travel to Atlanta Thursday to surrender in his Georgia election interference case. He noted on Truth Social that he'll be arrested by Fonnie Willis, who he referred to as a radical left district attorney. The African-American Fulton County DA who launched the investigation into Trump and his allies has given the defendants until noon Friday to turn themselves in. South Texas is bracing for the arrival of a tropical storm. Harold is expected to make a landfall just south of Corpus Christi around midday, that's Central Time, causing coastal flooding, dangerous rip currents, and high surf as it approaches the coast. Some areas are likely to see anywhere from 3 to 7 inches of rain. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
There are troubles in the Sepulveda Pass on the 405 South at Mulholland Skirball. That's an accident blocking the carpool lane. Also seeing delays on the northbound side from Carson Street up to Santa Monica Boulevard. In Burbank, a wreck on the 5 South at Alameda Avenue in the number 2 lane. Traffic slowing there from Empire Avenue. And in downtown LA, a disabled vehicle on the 101 North past Alameda Street.
Warning, if you are 60 or older, RSV can be a dangerous respiratory virus.
Not all dangers come with warning labels. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about getting vaccinated against RSV today. Learn more at bewareofrsv.com. This message is brought to you by Pfizer.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer over 50 different custom window treatments, including faux wood blinds and shutters, all at prices less than retail. Plus, we'll send you free samples before you buy. Don't hire an expensive pro. Do it yourself and save big at Blindster.com.
Is this the title? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. The Dodgers, baseball's hottest team, are back in action after getting 2 days off. They're in Cleveland today for the start of a 6-game road trip. The Dodgers are 17-2 in August and 29 games over 500. James Harden spoke to NBA investigators Monday about calling Philadelphia 76ers president Daryl Morey a liar. The league is trying to determine if the Sixers violated salary cap rules. Harden told the investigators he exercised his $35.6 million option with the Sixers in June only because Morey told him he would trade him if he agreed to the option. Morey announced last week he's not trading Harden, prompting the 10-time All-Star to put Morey on blast. Harden wants to be traded to the Clippers. Morey is asking for a starter, maybe 2, and multiple first-round picks. Stay tuned on this drama. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
When a cold comes on strong, knock it out with Vicks DayQuil Severe for max strength daytime relief. Just 1 dose of Vicks DayQuil Severe starts to relieve 9 of your worst cold and flu symptoms to help take you from 9 to none. Power through your day with Vicks DayQuil Severe, the daytime non-drowsy, coughing, aching, fever, sore throat, 9 to none medicine. Use as directed.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice, and injustice. The courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
What make you?
The
California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
All right, let me reset the table right quick for those who may have just tuned in. Kenneth B. Morris Jr. is our guest in this hour. He is the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. Yes, you heard me correctly. He is a descendant of both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. What a rare lineage. And we're honored to have him on this program in this hour. So you were teeing up something quite nicely, Kenneth. Let me ask you just to back up just a beat again for those who may just be tuning in. Back up a beat and answer the question. Start that answer again to my question about the providence that you encountered years after trying to avoid dealing with this lineage, and then you can finish the story that you left us hanging with moments ago.
Yeah, well, I read this. In 2005, I read a National Geographic magazine article. The story was actually written in 2003, but I didn't see it until 2 years later. And the cover story was 21st century slaves, and it was an article about human trafficking and modern-day slavery existing all over the world and affecting millions of men, women, and children. And that article just hit me squarely between the eyes and just floored me. And I wanted to learn more about the issue. And so I just started to do my research. And there was one night when I was sitting in my living room and I was reading another article. And it was an article about a 12-year-old girl who was forced to be a sex slave in the brothels of Southeast Asia and service countless men almost every single day. And down the hallway, I could hear my two daughters getting ready for bed. And my older daughter, Jenna, was about the same age, just a little bit younger as the girl that I was reading about. And my younger daughter, Nicole, was about 7 or 8 years old. And they were laughing, and they were playing, and they were about to get down on their knees and say their prayers and get tucked safely into bed. And my mind just starts racing, and I can't wrap my brain around what I'm reading about this 12-year-old girl who was forced to do all of these things for these sick individuals. And then hearing my daughters, and I remember thinking to myself, that's what young girls and boys should be doing, is getting tucked safely into bed. And when I walked in to say goodnight to my girls, I had this moment where I literally could not look them in the eyes. And I didn't feel like I could look them in the eyes and then walk away and not do something about this. And it was almost immediately, and everything just started just boiling up inside of me. And I understood that I did have on one side the legacy of Frederick Douglass as the great abolitionist, and on the other side, Booker T. Washington as a great educator. And abolition through education. How can we unfit communities to allow slavery to exist and thrive? And that message really came from both of my ancestors understanding from a very young age that education was going to be their pathway to freedom, and they would have to steal their education. And for Frederick Douglass, when he was about 8 or 9, he was chosen from among all of the children on the plantation on the eastern shore of Maryland, where he had been born into slavery with the name Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. He would go to Baltimore to be the house servant for his enslavers' family. The importance of this move was he was leaving in an environment where he wasn't around people that could teach him to read and write, because as we know from our U.S. history, it was illegal to teach an enslaved person to read and write. But now he was going to be in Baltimore. He would be around free black children. He'd be around poor white children. But what happened most importantly when he got there, his slave mistress had never had a slave before him, didn't know that it was illegal to teach him. And the way the story goes, which is kind of a white savior narrative, it's told that Sophia Auld, out of the goodness and kindness of her Christian heart, began to teach young Frederick Bailey his ABCs, which is what happened. But the nuanced part of the story, which is left out, is that he asked her to teach him. And in my mind, that was his first moment of self-liberation. And so she began to teach him his ABCs, and that was all he needed, was that little spark of light into his mental darkness, into his mental bondage. And then you know what happened next is his enslaver found out about the lessons and got angry, and he looked at Frederick and he looked at his wife and he said, "You cannot teach a slave how to read and write, because if you do, it will unfit him to be a slave." And I hope your audience heard that message. It will unfit him to be a slave. Frederick looked at his master and thought, if you don't want me to have this, I'm going to do everything in my power to gain it. And so that is at the foundation of the work that we do at Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. Through education, how can we unfit communities to allow slavery to exist and thrive?
I don't know too many black families who are aware the issue of education isn't paramount. Neither of my parents had a chance to go to college. I'm the first person on either side of my family to get a college education. First person on either side. And then after I go to Indiana University as the eldest of all these kids, 10 kids in my family, I now have brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews who've gone to college and graduated from great institutions like Hampton and Morehouse and Indiana University and beyond. I got a nephew graduating next year. I mean, I had a nephew who was in the class I'm thinking of the billionaire. I'm blanking on his name right now. The billionaire who spoke, Robert Smith, spoke at Morehouse. Spoke at Morehouse a couple of years ago and agreed to pay the debt for all the students in that class. It turns out I had a nephew graduating that year. We were in the audience that day. He was graduating. Just turns out that this Negro happens to be so smart. He was on a scholarship at Morehouse, and so Smith offers to pay his debt, but he didn't have any debt. He was on scholarship. I said, man, that's the luck of the Tavis Smiley family, man. The one guy who can get his education paid for happens to be on scholarship. So I thank God for that. But anyway, it's just a hilarious story for our entire family. Trust and believe. I say all that to say that I'm a witness to how education can turn one family. I go first, and then many of my 9 siblings go. And now nieces and nephews, as I said, are graduating. So education clearly, as Malcolm X once said, is, in fact, and can be our passport to the future. But if education is an issue, Kenneth, in my family and in other black families, when you're the descendant of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, I can't imagine that education is not a theme in that family.
Yeah, well, you said it. I don't know of any black families where education is not important, and that's not necessarily the narrative that's put out out there in public consciousness. But we are about black excellence, and certainly in our family, education was important. But we were also allowed to follow our own path as well too. And so for education, for me, I actually dropped out of college after a couple of years because I had an opportunity to travel around the world as a singer. With the group The Young Americans, and then I had a chance to tour with the great R&B singer Howard Hewitt as a background singer, and then really was kind of removed from all of the education until I started doing this work. And I remember sitting in a class and talking to students about the importance of education, and all of a sudden this light bulb goes off into my head and said, wait a minute, you never finished college. Who are you to talk about how important education is? So at that time, and I don't know if you remember this, but you and I met for the first time in person at the University of Laverne when Dr. Cornel West was giving a speech there, and Laverne had just given me an honorary doctorate for the work that I was doing. And so it all just kind of came together, and I decided to go back to school and to get my degree, which I did in 2018. So for education, for me, it was a longer journey. But for my brother graduated from Tuskegee, and my sister graduated from the University of San Francisco, and they took the traditional path and timeline for education.
And I'm just curious. I've known many others who have had that experience. It took them a while to get their degree, and I didn't tell you the whole backstory of my backstory. I ain't got time for all that. It took me a while to get mine, as a matter of fact. So I know what that feels like. But again, given what you stepped aside to do, how did it feel when you finally got that piece of paper?
Woo! There's a photograph somewhere out there where I finally was put in my hands because I was asked to speak at the Frederick Douglass annual lecture at the University of Laverne. And then when I finished my speech, they presented me with a framed copy of my degree. So it felt fantastic, and I was able to finally say to my mother, all of your children are college graduates, which she was very, very, very happy about. But I just wanted to tell you, you're making me think about Frederick Douglass again and the importance of education. And he was the first African American to be nominated for Vice President of the United States, first African American U.S. Marshal, first African American Ambassador, Consul General to Haiti, first African American Recorder of Deeds in the District of Columbia, and the first African American to have a statue dedicated in his honor in 1899 in Rochester, New York, which was his adopted hometown. And people would ask him, where did you go to school? Where did you get your education? And never spent one day of his life in a classroom. He had no formal education, which is, it's hard for me to even believe that he could accomplish everything he did, but it shows you how brilliant he is. And people would say, where did you go to school? I need to know where you got your education. And he would respond on occasion by saying, my diploma is written on my back.
As only Frederick Douglass could say, my diploma is written on my back. With all due respect to Kanye West, I'm glad you finally got that degree, because you can't be a college dropout when you are the descendant of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. I digress. More when we come forward with Kenneth B. Morris Jr. on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth. Speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go. Shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit notimetowait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Parents, we know we can't protect our kids from everything. Eventually, they're going to bump their heads or scrape their knees. But we can protect them from 6 types of cancer. HPV, or human papillomavirus, is a common, preventable virus that can cause cancer later in life. The HPV vaccine prevents human papillomavirus and all the cancers it can cause. The American Cancer Society recommends getting your sons and daughters the HPV vaccine starting at age 9 to protect them later in life.
Are you looking for a tax preparation firm that understands the unique financial challenges of African American business owners? Then look no more. Wealth Management Financial Advisors can prepare and file your individual and business taxes. They're committed to providing their clients with the best possible service. See how they make the greatest impact on your taxes. Find them at wealthmanagementlb.com or call them at 562-427-8877. That's 562-427-8877.
Hi, it's Tavis Smiley. KBLA Talk 1580 is inviting you to join us on Saturday, September 16th, 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. for our very first economic empowerment event for the community. This event is free and is powered by Caltrans. We're doing this in association with Rambo House, and here's Rambo to tell you more.
Contracts. I'm going to say it again for all of us small business owners out there. Contracts. Rambo House, KBLA, Tavis, me. Oh my God, this is going to be massive. I truly thank Caltrans for giving us the opportunity to focus on contracts. Listen, that's what it's all about to be a small business in LA. That's how we hire our own. That's how we expand our community is contracts. KBLA1580.com is for you to have a seat at our contracts-focused event. Contract Ready does it again. We had over 900 last time. So you guys know how exciting this is. And if you just think that you want to get into contracts and you're close to it, bring your friends out for September 16th at the Marriott Hotel. Listen, you know where to register. KBLA1580.com. Come see me. I can't wait to see you. Let's do it, Tavis.
So be sure to go to KBLA1580.com for all the details. We'll see you Saturday, September 16th.
Made fresh daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Kenneth B. Morris Jr., I was just listening the other day to Howard Hewitt. I know Howard well, as do you. And that gospel track he put out, Say Amen, which I still love all these years later. Was just listening to that the other day, in fact. I don't know that Frederick Douglass or Booker T. Washington could sing, but their offspring, Kenneth B. Morris Jr., can sing. Tell me right quick what it was like touring with Howard Hewitt.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I got to tour with him, I think just under a year. And, he, at that time, he was at the top of his game.
Yeah.
And so, he was a love ballad singer in addition to that great song, Say Amen. And, me being in my 20s, it was a lot of fun being out on the road. And I just, I looked up to him as a singer. He was one of my favorite singers, and to have an opportunity to work with him. And the very first song that I heard him sing when we were in rehearsal was Say Amen.
Oh, yeah.
And if you remember, the background parts don't come in until the very end.
Very end, exactly.
So you get to listen to that whole song. But Frederick Douglass could sing.
Oh, he could.
Frederick Douglass he could. He was
Okay.
a musician. He taught himself to play the violin. He taught my great-grandfather Joseph, his grandson, how to play the violin. Joseph would continue his music education at the Boston Conservatory of Music. He would go on to tour the world. He was the first black classical recording artist for the Victor Talking Machine Company. He played in the White House on 3 occasions. So Frederick Douglass was a great music teacher in addition to everything else he did as a Renaissance man.
I ain't mad at Frederick Douglass, man. I'm learning stuff every day about Frederick Douglass. One day I have to tell you the story. As a matter of fact, I may just find the podcast and send it to you. But I've said many, many times on this program and beyond, the audience knows this, I regard Dr. King as the greatest American this country's ever produced. And I've said that many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
I've studied him and written about him. And so King is my guy. Nothing but mad respect for Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. But my refrain has been for years that King is the greatest American this country's ever produced. And I've only had a couple of folk in 30 years of saying that ever pushed back on me. One of them was Dick Gregory, who I mentioned the other day. Dick Gregory fought me on that. He said, nope, you're wrong. I said, okay, Dick, who you got? He said, John Brown. I said, come on, Dick, you cannot be serious.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a big fight about John Brown being the greatest American this country's ever produced. But the one time somebody pushed me, and they pushed me to the wall, it's now become a classic conversation. On this program one day, I said that, and Killer Mike, the great rap artist, Killer Mike said, Tavis, I love you, you my boy, but we're going to have to fight about this. I said, okay, who you got? And he came with Frederick Douglass. And by the time that conversation ended an hour later, I was almost convinced that I was wrong and he was right, because he came so hard for Frederick Douglass. I don't know if Killer Mike is part of the Frederick Douglass lineage, but he might as well be, because he can make an argument like nobody else for why Frederick Douglass is the greatest American this country has ever produced. Our remaining moments with Kenneth B. Morris Jr. when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
What does access mean?
Access means owning a home.
Access means growing my business.
Access means building generational wealth. No matter your goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Programs and Initiatives provide the tools and resources to help you reach them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, life doesn't stop when cancer starts. After diagnosis, treatment is vital. But for some, just getting there, to appointments, chemo, or radiation, is a major challenge. You can change that. Volunteer to give rides with the American Cancer Society Road to Recovery program. Driving for a few hours of your day can make a life-saving difference for someone with cancer. Visit cancer.org/drive to learn more.
KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dominique DePrima from the show First Things First, weekday mornings from 6 to 9. Join us tomorrow with Powerhouse Entertainment attorney Nianza Shaw, plus headlines, trending topics, and your phone calls. It's a Wealth Building Wednesday, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for education as a right, not a privilege. Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science is a private, non-profit, community-founded, student-centered university committed to cultivating diverse health profession leaders who are dedicated to social justice and health equity for underserved populations. CDU does this through outstanding education, clinical service, and community engagement. Recently, Charles Drew University made history by opening only the 5th medical school at an historically black university. Congratulations, South LA. Congratulations to the Dean of the medical school, Dr. Deborah Prothos-Stith. CDU is now training doctors and providing $90 million in annual economic benefit to Watts and surrounding neighborhoods. To apply for medical school, get more information, or sign your child up for the Junior Doctors Saturday School program, visit cdrewu.edu. That's cdrewu.edu. At KBLA, we are dedicated to equity in education and ending healthcare apartheid, and we don't back down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Dominique DePrima here. Having a good credit score is one critical step to obtain a loan to buy a home. But did you know that your credit score is just one factor in getting a mortgage loan? Think about this. Lenders also consider your income, your employment history, current monthly debts, the size of the loan, and the amount of your down payment. Whatever your financial goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives support you in reaching them. Access your personal financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
We've only got 4 minutes left in this rich dialogue with Kenneth B. Morris Jr., the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. Let me do 2 more things in the time we have left. Number one, Kenneth, you are the real deal, but I remember some years ago, and if I'm wrong, you'll correct me about this, but I remember some years ago, y'all had to go after somebody and expose him from right around the country, impersonating, doing Frederick Douglass stand-up, if you will, and suggesting that he was the great-great-grandson. Of course, you remember this story, if I'm right about it. Am I right about this?
Yeah. Oh, you're right about it. You have a great memory.
Yeah.
We called him at the time Fake Fred.
Fake Fred.
He had a long he had a long. We finally shut him down, but that took us a little while to do that. But yeah, that's it happens.
Running around the country impersonating and acting as if he was the great-great-grandson, as he did these sort of Frederick Douglass performances. But I'm glad y'all shut him down in that regard. Let me close in the 2.5, 3 minutes we have left, giving you an opportunity to tell us more about, again, the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives and the great work you all are doing through the organization.
Well, Frederick Douglass, as I've said a couple of times, was a Renaissance man. You know that he was also a journalist and a publisher, published a North Star newspaper and Frederick Douglass paper, and we're continuing that literary tradition. We've partnered with Forefront Books and Simon & Schuster last year to start a Frederick Douglass Books imprint to amplify the voices of Black and brown authors. Our first publication was the Douglass Family Edition of Frederick Douglass's first autobiography, The Narrative. That was published in June, so I encourage people to go and check that out. And today, we're publishing our second book. It's a memoir by Nathaniel Glover called Striving for Justice. He was the first Black sheriff in the South in Jacksonville, Florida after Reconstruction, and he's got a really powerful story that connects him to Axe Handle Sunday, which was a racially motivated attack that took place in Jacksonville on August 27 in 1960, when a group of white men attacked African Americans who were engaging in a sit-in protest. And Nat, as a 17-year-old boy, found himself in the middle of that attack. So I encourage people to go out and pick up both of those books anywhere you can buy books. We've got a Frederick Douglass Museum Center project that we're proposing to build in Rochester, New York. It's a 4 to 5 year project that will be about knowledge, justice, and equality. We're making great progress on that. And then we've got another project called 1 Million Abolitionists, where we're endeavoring to give away 1 million copies of that Douglass Family Edition of the Narrative that I just mentioned to young people all over the world, because we've got book bans, and Frederick Douglass's Narrative was banned in Oklahoma and Edmond public schools. So we're working to put that book into the hands of young people everywhere. We're at 100,000 copies given away so far with the help of donors and corporate sponsorships and foundational grants. So we have a long way to go to get to the million. But I just encourage everybody that's listening to us to go to our website, which is fdfi.org. It's the acronym for Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. And you can get information on all of these projects, including the new book imprint.
Not unlike Frederick Douglass, his great-great-great-grandfather, and not unlike Booker T. Washington, his great-great-grandfather, Kenneth B. Morris Jr. is busy. And I love it. I love hearing all that, and I'm glad we could make space for you to share with us all the great work that's being done by the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, FDFI.org. Is that what you said? .org? .com? .org?
.org.
.org.
O-R-G.
Yeah, fdfi.org. Kenneth, man, always honored to be in dialogue with you, my friend. Thank you for your time today, and I wish you all the best. Nothing but the best in the months and years to come, sir.
Tavis, thank you very much for having me on. I always enjoy our conversations, and, keep up the great work that you're doing over there.
Appreciate you, man. All the best to you. There you have it. 3 hours gone, just like that. Back here tomorrow morning. Back tomorrow, I should say. Lord willing, to do it all over again. Until then, thanks for tuning in. And as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Former President Trump says